3 in the morning, and I wake up to the sound of engines where crickets used to be. You ever open your eyes and just know, deep in your bones, somebody just made a mistake they're going to regret for the rest of their life? Yeah, that was me, staring out my window, watching 16 cement trucks crawl down Willowbrook Lane like a funeral procession for common sense. They rolled straight into my backyard, headlights slicing through the mist, diesel rumbling. And there she was. Brittany Ashford, HOA president, self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, standing in yoga pants and pearls like she was directing a military operation instead of a crime against nature. Ugly Creek ends tonight, she chirped, hands on her hips. No more swamp ruining property values. And then the hoses roared. Gray concrete poured into that creek like lava swallowing rocks that had been polished by 100 years of rain, burying salamanders, moss, the soft burble of water that used to drift through my bedroom window at night. I just stood there on my porch swing, coffee shaking in my hand, watching them bury something older than any of us. And all I could think was, you people have no idea what you just started. Name's Ezra Blackwood, 58, master plumber, 30 years under sinks and inside crawl spaces most folks pretend don't exist. And if there's one thing you learn working with water, it's this: water always wins. Doesn't matter how rich you are, how pretty your house looks in real estate photos, how many committees you chair, physics does not care about your HOA bylaws. I bought that crooked little cottage on Willowbrook after my wife passed. Sarah used to call running water nature's lullaby. The place was cheap, suspiciously cheap, because it sat downhill from a row of million-dollar McMansions that sprouted after 2018 like mushrooms after rain. Real estate agent called it a drainage challenge, which is code for bring boots. But I love that creek. Every morning I'd sit on the porch, black coffee steaming, listening to it chatter over stones. It smelled honest, wet earth, wildflowers life. Meanwhile, uphill you had chemical lawns and fresh mulch, that plastic suburban perfume of people trying to control nature with credit cards. Then Brittany knocked on my door. Perfect smile, dead eyes, that tone people use when they already decided your problem. We maintain standards here, she said, scanning my yard like she was pricing livestock. That swampy area behind your house is lowering property values. Swampy area. That swamp had been managing runoff for a century. But I could tell right then, this wasn't about water. It was about control. Some folks see something older than them and think it's an insult. 2 days later, first HOA violation. Then another. Then 6 more. Grass too tall. Mailbox too dark. Landscaping non-compliant. It was like being fined by a toddler with a rubber stamp and a vendetta. So I started reading the HOA documents. Every page. Every footnote. And here's the funny thing. They had rules about mailbox shades and blade length on lawnmowers, but not a single word about natural waterways. Because the original developers weren't idiots. They built around the creek. Brittany, though, she thought she could redesign geology with a clipboard. That's when I called Margaret Bellamy, my neighbor, 73, sharp as barbed wire, been there since before the McMansion invasion. She'd already been bullied into replacing a perfectly good deck because Brittany felt it was unsafe. That was the moment I realized this wasn't personal. It was a pattern. And here's where things get interesting, because plumbers understand pressure. Block one path, pressure builds somewhere else. You don't stop water, you just decide where the damage shows up. Spring rolled in early that year. First real rain came down steady and polite, nothing dramatic. And suddenly the fancy houses uphill started sprouting problems. Basement puddles. Driveways turning into streams. Decorative fountains overflowing like cheap margaritas. Brittany called an emergency HOA meeting. Slideshows, laser pointers, dramatic size. Blame the creek. Blame me. Said my uncontrolled water feature was overwhelming their engineered systems. That's when Harold Vance spoke up, retired county drainage engineer. Old guy with hands like sandpaper and zero patience for nonsense. Block that creek, he said, and you'll flood every house on this hill. She smiled like he'd complimented her haircut. That was the day I knew we were headed somewhere ugly. But the real twist? I started digging into public records. Old plumber habit. If something smells wrong, Check what's buried. Turns out Brittany's husband, Rick Ashford, built the whole neighborhood. And those gorgeous homes? Built cheap where it mattered most, underground. Minimal drainage. Foundations depending on that natural creek like a crutch nobody talked about. That creek wasn't an eyesore. It was their life support. And once I saw that, I stopped arguing. I started documenting. Photos every morning. Cracks forming like spider webs across driveways. Water pooling where it never had. Soil shifting. I even teamed up with a community college professor, Dr. Kim, environmental scientist who practically lit up when she saw the mess. We installed monitoring wells, sensors, cameras. Made my backyard look like a NASA launch site. And right about then, Brittany made her biggest mistake. She concreted the creek. You already know how that part went. The trucks, the gray sludge, the victory smile. At first, nothing happened. A few weeks of silence. Just enough time for her to feel right. Then came the first real storm. Not a drizzle. Not polite rain. I'm talking sky-splitting thunder, the kind that rattles window frames and makes dogs hide under beds. Rain came down sideways, hammering that concrete trench like it owed money. And water had nowhere to go. See, natural soil absorbs, slows things down, spreads pressure. Concrete, it redirects, like turning a whisper into a shout. By 3 a.m, the neighborhood sounded alive in all the wrong ways. Metal groaning, concrete popping, sirens in the distance. I sat on my porch with coffee, watching water climb higher and higher like it was reclaiming a debt. Then the moment that made national news. Live TV crew out, they're filming the flooding. Cameras rolling when Brittany's own foundation shifted. 8 inches. You could hear it grind. That deep, stomach-dropping sound like a tree splitting in winter. Her white BMW floated halfway out of the driveway like a confused boat. And there she was, storming toward my porch in a bathrobe, water sloshing around her knees, screaming into the cameras. This is your fault. I remember taking a slow sip of coffee, rain mist blowing sideways across the porch, and thinking this is what karma looks like when it's got a weather system behind it. I didn't make it rain, I told her. Calm as a Sunday morning. I just understood where the water would go. Right on cue, an EPA specialist stepped in a frame. Credentials, badge, the whole federal flavor. Started listing violations like a grocery receipt, Clean Water Act, environmental destruction, illegal stream alteration. You could actually watch the story flip in real time. From neighborhood drama to federal case. Within hours, houses were red tagged, families evacuated, news helicopters overhead, and suddenly nobody cared about mailbox colors anymore. 3 months later, the ruling came down like a gavel from God. Full creek restoration ordered. Massive fines. Special assessments big enough to make millionaires sweat. Brittany's house got condemned. Sold at auction for a fraction of what they paid. Last I heard, she moved into an apartment complex with rules against altering natural drainage. You can't write irony that clean. But here's the part nobody expects. The aftermath wasn't just revenge. It was relief. Margaret became the new HOA president. First meeting had real coffee instead of bottled water and fear. We restored the creek properly. Native plants, retention zones, wildlife returning like the land was exhaling after holding its breath too long. Herons came back. Salamanders too. And the sound of water over stone, that lullaby Sarah loved, came home. People ask me what the lesson is, like there's some neat little moral you can print on a bumper sticker. Truth is, it's messier than that. Power isn't the same as wisdom, and control isn't the same as understanding. You can bully neighbors, rewrite rules, pour concrete over anything that makes you uncomfortable. But nature, physics, truth, those things don't negotiate. They wait, patient as gravity. And when they answer back, they don't raise their voices. They just rise. Every morning now, I sit on that same porch swing, coffee in hand, listening to the creek run clear again. And sometimes I think about how close we came to losing it all. Not just the water, but the community, the sanity, the humility. Because here's the uncomfortable question that sticks with me. If you'd been in her shoes, power in your pocket, neighbors beneath you, a problem that didn't fit your perfect picture, Would you have listened, or would you have poured the concrete too? I'm curious what you think. Have you ever seen someone try to control something bigger than themselves and pay for it later? Was it karma, justice, or just physics doing its job? Tell me where you stand. Because sooner or later, every neighborhood meets its Britney, and every creek gets tested.